If we're talking about beating someone up on the ground, I think you got to start with full guard. Full guard being one of the most, if not the most, common defensive tactics for the bottom man in the entire bottom game arsenal. You know it's on when that guard gets locked up. You see how those legs have crossed in the back? It's full guard time. We're attacking the full guard. And when you got somebody in full guard, what they're most likely going to be trying to do is try to control your posture with a variety of different grips. Here we have an underhook and an overhook. What those grips are doing is they're keeping you low. Remember, on the ground, space is power, and he's trying to prevent you from making space. Now, the first thing you can do to make space is just get up quick and rip your hand out and punch him. Let's take a look at that in action. This works especially when it's slippery, when you're sweaty. Rips that arm out. Now, see that space? That space is what's allowing Fedor to strike. And notice, Fedor misses here, and the space is gone. But this is the nature of the game. You come up for a little bit, blast, or he pulls you down, you reset. You go low, high, reset low, go back high. And one thing that makes that easier is when you put a frame in place. You want to think of a frame as a way in which you keep them down while you come up. In the top for mixed martial arts, it's most often going to appear as a hand somewhere on their body, just like Fedor has now. But you'll notice Fedor loses that hand across the body. And you will also notice that his hand has returned back to where it started, back on the mat. That is a big part of this game. You constantly get the frame, you lose it, you try the cycle all over again. Let's watch Fedor start to set up another frame. He puts his hand on the mat, as well as posts on his right leg. When he does that, he allows the space, creates it so that he can slip his head in underneath Krokop's chin. When he does that, that's going to allow him to start wiggling his arm free, as you can see here. And then, after a series of punches and some scrambling, some struggling, he's finally able to establish that frame, which we are going to be naming the cross frame. This frame you're seeing right here is called the cross frame because it goes across the opponent's neck. With a frame in place, not just a cross frame, but with any frame, it is not only harder for your opponent to keep you down, but it's much easier for you to come up while keeping them pinned down. So notice that Fedor has stood up here, and he's got that cross frame still in place, and he's using that to actually push Krokop down and keep him flat. While Krokop is flat, the frame isn't the only thing that keeps him flat, but it's one of the major things. Fedor is able to stand up, and when you're able to start standing up in mixed martial arts over your opponent, that is when you start raining down some bombs, and Fedor's not going to do it here. But let's check out the next clip to talk more about framing on the bicep with Khabib here. Notice instead of a frame across the neck, we've got a frame on the bicep. That is what's going to allow Khabib to keep Conor pinned down while he comes up to create the space. The space that he needs to violently beat this guy. Here we see Khabib really starts to make a lot of space, and he's keeping Conor pinned down with that bicep frame the entire time. Now is when the bombs start to come down. Watch as Khabib keeps that bicep frame in place during this whole little sequence here as he hits Conor. That frame on the bicep stops Conor from coming up and being able to pull Khabib back down. Another frame that we're going to be working with is the shoulder frame. This is where you put your forearm right in the crux of the deltoid. Not the bicep, not across the neck, but right across the shoulder. Right where that pec meets the deltoid is where you're going to put that frame. And once again, you're going to notice with this frame, we're going to keep the opponent pinned. They stay down while we come up. And we have all this beautiful space to start throwing some shots at the bottom guy, using that shoulder frame to create the space that we need. Where there's single shoulder frame, there's also double shoulder frame. Two frames designed to really pin down the opponent. You can also do double with bicep control too. We'll take a little bit later. We'll take a look at that a little bit later on. But notice the two shoulder pressure frames. Put right where the pec meets the deltoid. And with this one, what you're going to be doing is pulling out one arm while you keep one arm down. And you're going to punch with the arm that has been pulled out. And at the end of that punch, or elbow, or whatever it is that you want to throw, you're going to be returning right back into the double shoulder frame position. You start from that double shoulder frame, you pull one arm out, you hit him, and you can return right back to it when you're done, or to any of the other frames in this instructional. Sucks being put in a can opener. It's the worst. Cranks your neck. Miserable. Typically, before you can get a can opener, you've got to get double shoulder control. Once you've acquired this double shoulder control, you'll be able to grab your hands together around the back of his head, and you're going to pull on the crown of his head, thinking about making his nose touch his chest. Not only is the can opener a magnificent torture device, it can also be used as a frame in order to create the space you need in order to land the bombs that you want to land. Oftentimes, your can opener will be working in a coordination with double shoulder control because they're so close. You kind of switch between the two and land those big shots. Here is the can opener kind of playing out. You see he's got it on Matsera. He's going to use it to frame, make a little space, and throw those shots. A big part of the top man's toolbox in order to create space is this idea of putting one leg up. In order to put one leg up, the first thing that you're going to want to do is to create some kind of frame like we talked about earlier. So in this case, we're looking at a frame on the bicep for some bicep control. Once that frame is established, that's when a leg typically comes up. What you're going to see that does is it actually makes space between McGregor's hips and the floor. And when that happens, there's much more pressure on the lock of the guard, increasing the odds that he'll open that sucker up. And remember, we're using our frame to keep McGregor on the ground so that he can't come up. That also puts a lot of pressure on the guard, and inevitably, he has to open that thing up. Especially when the threat of the punches just becomes too great. And when that full guard is open, that's when you can do a lot of damage. Because your hips are no longer controlled by his legs, so you can really move freely with them in order to power up your strikes. Now, if he's good, eventually he's going to relock his full guard to minimize that damage coming down on him. But, just like we talked before about frames, we're going to restart. Notice, Khabib has put the knee down. That was very important to note. The one leg coming up can be done after getting the frame, like we showed in the last video, or before getting the frame in order to help get the frame, like I'm about to show you now. So watch this. Khabib's got two hands on the mat, and you notice that one leg is coming up. He's going to use that one leg to navigate his hands onto the inside, in this case, shoulder frame. That one leg up made the space he needed in order to slip that frame in. Now he's just going to start punching and then return to the shoulder pressure. But notice he's continuing to keep that one leg up. That's really going to aid in making things difficult for Conor. And now we're going to go for the full stand-up. I'm going to call this one a three-pronged stand-up. Now, let's take a look at what I mean by three prongs. Three forms of base we've got going on. One, the leg. Two, the shoulder pressure, the shoulder frame. And then three, the head. These three frames in combination are going to make it very easy for you to bring your second leg up. If we change the angle, we'll be able to see that. Notice, second leg is up. When you're on two legs, you are extremely dangerous. Notice, as of right now, Khabib is keeping that shoulder frame in place, as well as the head to keep McGregor flat. That's going to keep McGregor down long enough so that Khabib can just posture straight up. This straight up position is really what you're aiming for with all these frames and these head positions and these stand-ups. Once you get straight up, that is when you can rain down hellfire upon thee. There is so much space here. There is so much space, and there's nothing controlling your hips or upper body, so you can just rain down bombs upon this guy. I will say this. It is very important you stuff the up kick. You remain cognizant of it. Through my research, I find the best way to do this is to stuff them with your hips. You need to get your hips on top of his hips so that his hips are carrying the weight of your hips. And when that happens, there's no more up kick. Standing up, a lot of the times you're going to be dealing with open guard because they just can't keep a lock on closed guard. So it's very important you learn how to clear legs and then throw bombs off of clearing the legs. So let's take a look at another way to stand up. We're going to be looking at a cross frame stand up. So before we were using more bicep control, single and double bicep control in combination with the leg coming up to get up. Now we're going to be using a cross frame in order to get to the two-legged position. Take a look at that cross frame here. Notice it's been extended somewhat. It's been extended past 90 degrees. Frames of the arm tend to be really strong when they're extended past 90 degrees. Now, what he's going to do is use that to posture up first. He's going to get himself up by using that cross frame. A little bit of a struggle here, but if you wait for it, bam, Fedor postured up. That's a lot of space the big man just created off of that cross frame. Then what Fedor is going to do next is he's going to stand up on the one leg. Remember, we've been talking about how that one leg really seems to make matters worse for the bottom man. Puts a lot of pressure on the guard. And in order to get two legs up, usually you got to put one leg up first. Here, we can see that Fedor is two legs up, and he's actually maintaining that cross frame to keep Prokop down even while he is standing up. And he's starting to stand up and put tremendous amount of threat onto Prokop. All that space, all that distance, all that standing over you. Scary stuff. Standing up from double shoulder control. Those two frames against where the deltoid meets the pec on the shoulder. Naturally, we're going to start off by getting the double shoulder frame in place. And from here, we've already created a good amount of space. With that, we are going to be bringing the first leg up, as you see like so, using my frame to make my legs much less heavy as I put weight on him, using that frame and the first leg coming up to get that second leg up. And you've just stood up and you're ready to start doing some damage. Now here, we've got a double bicep control stand-up. So putting two frames on the biceps, as you're seeing here. Fantastic double frame for keeping your opponent flat as you get up. We've got the two legs up from Fedor. Notice he's standing over the man, and he's still got those frames in place. Till he starts punching, of course. And being in this position, while it is tiring for the top man, puts a tremendous amount of pressure onto the lock of that full guard. And if you are here for long enough, that thing is going to open, especially when you start throwing shots. Notice the legs opened up pretty quickly after George entered that hinge standing position. Notice how George St. Pierre gets his hips right on top of Dan Hardy's hips. That's going to make it hard for Dan to do anything. George starts walking in a little bit. Now Dan's in some severe trouble. But notice the frame is still in place here. George still uses that shoulder control even while he's bent over in the hinge standing position. Those frames still come into play in this position. From here, George is going to cock up a big bomb, as you can see here, and he's going to pin him down with that shoulder frame while he uncorks a big old shot right onto Dan's head. We're going to smash. Punches him a little bit, little scramble. And notice when he's done shooting his punches, right back to the double shoulder frame. Pulls one back out, keeps him pinned down with one, throws that bomb. So even from that hinge standing position, your frames are going to be very important. Look at the hinge stand up in combination with the frames one more time. Let's watch it play out with Fedor and Prokop here. Hands starting on the mat. Like we said, this is kind of the bottom of the hierarchy when it comes to the top position. We put our head down. Head is great for starting things off in terms of making a frame. Bringing the elbow back, that's actually going to trap Crow Cop's hip just a bit. First leg comes up. Now with the head position and the leg up, it's going to be pretty easy to slip in a frame. So here we're going to slip in a shoulder frame on Crow Cop's left shoulder, using that to get straight back. Boom, postured up. Notice Fedor still has the left shoulder frame. Gonna bring that elbow in a little bit to trap the left leg of Crow Cop. Keeps that shoulder control as he is now in the hinge standing position. Got the weight over the hips, sitting on the hips, bent over, and always keeping that frame right there. He's still using that frame. So make sure, hinge stand up, you are still at the point where you're using frames. Now, things don't always go perfect. Sometimes, he wrist fights back, you throw a punch, and you miss. And that is when you're going to end up right back in the position that you started in. And that's kind of this game. You go up and down, up and down, up and down. Let's see him go up again. Notice when Fedor came back down, he fell in place with 2 shoulder frames. That's going to make it a lot easier to stand back up this time. We're going to start by bringing that first leg up. He's going to keep his guard locked. And then Fedor is going to come down to rest. Know this, if you put your leg up and you don't like what you're feeling or you're a little tired, put the leg down, take a rest. Try again in a second. It does, however, maintain that shoulder frame, which is going to make it easy to hit Crow Cop with a bomb there. Gets right back to the shoulder control position. He's got his head in place as well. And Fedor's going to do something a little different here. He's going to open up the guard of Crow Cop first. So he brings his knee in to trap the hip of Crow Cop. Then using his shoulder frame and head position, he really starts pushing his hips back. Fedor pushes his own hips back, which is going to put a lot of pressure on the guard of Crow Cop, and that's going to open it up. Now with that thing open, we got the one leg coming up already. There is not a closed guard to stop him anymore. Second leg comes up. Notice, we're back in the hinge position. Jesus Christ, that was a big bob. That would have been so bad. We're back down at the beginning. Fedor's got those double shoulder frames in place. And whether it was a decision by Crow Cop or something that Fedor forced, Crow Cop opens up his guard here. And when someone opens their guard, I should say, that is your sign to start standing up. Watch as Fedor just kind of explodes up. And this is a thing we haven't seen before yet. This is a cross frame and a bicep frame in combination here. So you can mix those two together. Now look, Fedor is going to start removing those frames, making the space to try to land big bombs. Falls down. Got to repeat the process all over again. So we've taken a look at the hinge stand-up. But next we're going to take a look at the full stand-up, which I would say is almost always our goal, is to have that full stand-up posture over the opponent. And in order to analyze that position, we're going to be taking a look at this clip again. So notice Khabib is starting in that hinge stand-up with his head positioned in such a way that he's making McGregor's life miserable. He also has what looks to be a cross frame established on McGregor. Also going to notice McGregor's guard is open. That really gives Khabib here the go-ahead to just stand straight up. When you stand straight up, this is about the most amount of space you could make over somebody. This is a devastating amount of space, and the bottom man is in big trouble. After you hit him, you want to return to that standing position before he's able to get a grip on you and keep you down, and that really frees you up to just smash. But know this, every time you punch, you'll end up in the hinged position. And remember, the hinge position is good, but try to get back to standing as quick as you can so you don't get caught there. Stand up before he gets those grips. Those grips are what'll keep you in the hinged position or even lower. Notice, bent back down, hits the guy in the fetal position, and he wants to get right back up to standing in between the shots. What makes this especially awful is when you trap that head against the fence, you're standing over him, he's trapped, you start clearing legs and throwing shots, but we'll talk about that later on in the series.